Coming up on That's a Great Point.
That's also a good way to ruin relationships. Work.
Yup.
Say more about work. How is work a great way to ruin relationships?
When
Oh,
the
ooh.
relationship with work takes precedence over the relationships with people, that is
Hmm.
whenever it's a problem. At what point are the tasks that we are doing more important than the people around us? And
Which really ties into the boundaries I was talking about. Is I didn't feel like at the time I was putting my family on the back burner, like I was, but for what I felt like was a greater purpose. And that's
Mm.
how that conversation came to be, which was, okay, I get why you're doing this, Tanya, but I need to know there's going to be an end point.
hey, neighbor, on today's episode of That's a Great Point, how to ruin perfectly good relationships. Today we've got the whole bag of tricks: self-criticism, criticizing others, repressing our feelings, insecurities, setting boundaries, clear communication, and a whole lot of that's what she says. So join us today with special guest star Tanya Smart. It's a fun one. Thanks for playing along. Welcome to That's a Great Point, the attitude adjustment for your soul, where co-hosts Alina Doran, Michelle Aalbers, and Lee Smart discuss deep topics around a life well lived. Let's start the show. Seemed like the last thing that we left on in our group message was the how to ruin perfectly good relationships.
Yeah,
Um,
that was great. And I love your post. I love your question. I thought it was awesome. So I think it'd be really fun if we talk in opposites, right?
Opposites.
Like just like Lee posed a question on Facebook, exactly the same way. Like, I've got one. Here's what I do that works every time to ruin relationships. Try this tip.
yeah, sounds like fun to come at it from the back end, doesn't it?
That's what I said.
That's what he said.
I wish Ty was here for this part. Um,
Okay.
okay.
I like it. All right. So how do we ruin perfectly good relationships? I'm thinking that I was actually writing about it a little bit, trying to come up with an article about it. Like,
Mm.
and the idea that I was writing about, that thoughts are real. Like, even if we're not saying it, if we're thinking negative thoughts and everything, it can automatically come across, and people will feel that you're thinking, "Oh, what the hell's wrong with you?" And then once you have people thinking, "Oh, what the hell's wrong with you?" It's like, "Oh, now every time I'm around this person, I associate shit feelings with this person." So then, how is that? It's not conducive to good relationships whenever we hold the negativity in us.
Oh
I
yeah.
can feel it, and then it's reflected back, and I don't know. I'm having a hard time enunciating and articulating and all of it this morning.
You're doing well.
Ovulating.
According to my ears, you're doing well.
Oh,
I, you know, I can't wait to read what you write, what you put out. Can't
mhm.
wait what you come up with. And what I hear you talk about is like rule number one: come in presuming and assuming all sorts of things. That's how you ruin a relationship. It's like come in with baggage, come in with negative thoughts,
Mm.
all like just baggage of assumptions.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm talking about is just starting with the self. Like, even in relationships, if our
Mm.
self is off, if our self is thinking negative thoughts, if we're in a bad mood, like the one of my favorite quotes of all time is the right conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation.
Uh-huh.
So if we're not taking care of ourself, then those thoughts, like, if I am not well, I'm automatically more critical of everything and everybody around me. And if I'm coming in with those critical thoughts, it's not a very nice place to come from. I call it letting the grumpy old codger that lives in my head loose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the complainer. Yeah. Yeah. Relationships start with self. That's 100%. Like leadership starts with your self leadership. Relationships start with how you're showing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Can I just go real quick to your bag of assumptions? I feel like we could create a great D&D character just off of having that.
say more. What are you imagining?
Okay, coming in with your bag of assumptions. First of all, it's got to be a bard. I don't know why, but
It's
a
got to be
bard.
a bard.
A
Bard.
bard.
B-A-R-D, bard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a bard in the fantasy world is someone who is a performer, typically someone who is a stage performer.
Oh, a
Highly
bard. Like,
creative.
Yeah.
got it.
Highly
Yeah.
creative, highly emotional.
Yeah. Most of the time their magic relies on their voice, their music typically. So they sing their songs and that's where their magic lies.
I don't know why this is where my brain went, but I feel like if we were creating a character right now for this article or topic, it would be the bard with his bag of assumptions and his super dramatic demeanor.
I'd love this to be an animated character, right? And the piece of luggage is not carry-on size. It's the kind you have to check in with the airline. It's huge. It's massive.
Mm-hmm. What's in
That's
the bag?
what she said.
Like, how many of these can we should have a secret game running? How many times in this recording is someone going to say that's what X said?
I think we could even broaden it out just a little bit into just how many times can we make an innuendo joke of any type?
I like it.
Okay.
I like it. I like it.
Repression is in the bag.
Mm.
Say more. Say more.
Miss Smart, you are being summoned by Mr. Smart.
Yes, my internet connection is unstable, so I totally missed what Mr. Smart said.
Oh.
Huh. You weren't frozen on my screen.
Y'all both froze. And then I heard laughter from the room. So I was like, well, I missed something.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I said say more about repression.
Well, that's probably my most guilty relationship ruiner is repression. So that's what's in the bard's bag.
Well, how does it show up in real life whenever you talk about repression?
So when your grumpy old codger comes out, or even like other people who shall remain nameless, and in case that this recording ever would get back to them, like when the whining or the pissiness comes out, I'm just like, I don't want to fuck with you. I'm not going to deal with this. Especially because I am a firm believer of if somebody is angry and they are either making me upset or angry, the time to discuss it is not in the moment when they or I don't have full control over my faculties, my feelings, et cetera, et cetera. But where my biggest problem is I don't always go to the point where, okay, we've all calmed down. It's time to revisit this. Right. So repression.
Mm.
The moment has passed. It's okay. It's fine. We don't need to deal with it anymore.
Mm.
I ain't saying it's right, but I'm saying it's there.
Yep.
That's what she said too.
I'm thinking what else is, yeah. The moment has passed. I like that. That was a good catch, Tanya. The moment has passed. That's what she said. What else is in the bag? Like self-loathing sometimes. Like, and how does that show up? Frustration with ourselves that we don't name, don't look at directly, but it just sits there, lurks in the background, like all sneaky. And then talking to someone else, noticing a quality in them that frustrates us immediately, like immediately, and we get really triggered by something. Statistically not improbable that what triggered us in the other person, we might be disliking in ourselves, right? That we're recognizing a part of ourselves. Again, pure theory, never been there, ever, but just imagining, right? Just really wild imagination. So yeah, self-loathing can be.
Oh, we're back to some favorite quotes. One of mine is, "There is something I see in that person that I can't stand about myself."
Yeah, who said that?
Oh, I want to say the first time I ever heard it said that way was Michelle. Come to think of it,
That's great. Yeah.
like it was not a new concept, but she said it in that way. I was like, "Oh, that's good. I'm keeping that. That one's now mine."
Great recall. Great recall, Mr. Smart. Yeah. Self-loathing. What else is there? There's so much there. It's fun.
Well, I know that if I'm off, personally, that I'm far more critical of everything, everybody, everything, self, whatever it is. And that criticism, it's almost like it just seeps out of me. I'm less like, I know a lot of people turn it more on themselves. Like, what the hell's wrong with me? Why can't I get anything right? I'm more likely to turn it outside and like, this is stupid. And why are these people doing such stupid things? And what's
What the
wrong with
hell's wrong
them?
with you?
Yeah. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? You idiot. Or just general frustration of situations in general. Like, so, and whenever I get like that, I isolate, more likely to isolate. Like, just, I want to pull away from everybody, which ends up making it worse rather than better.
I mean, so if we're talking about what's in the bag of assumptions, right? And the topic is relationships with people. How do we mess them up? How do we mess them up? And one of the first things we started talking about, well, you walk in with assumptions, like a giant bag, too big to check in your luggage. And we've got repression, we've got self-loathing, we've got external loathing and extreme criticism. I'm thinking about what's at the root of one-upping, like self-victimization. So the narratives that we've got a whole like stack of narratives, like we're a screenwriter.
The need to feel important, so therefore I'm going to throw out mine as more important than yours.
Insecurity.
Yeah, there you go. Insecurity is great. It's like, I heard that you experienced that, but let me tell you about what I went through.
Yeah, so much worse. You have an ache? Let me tell you about my hip surgery.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about childbirth?
Yeah. Well, you know what's really funny about that one is people will do it as a way to try to relate to people.
Yes.
But it never comes off as like I'm relating. It's just coming off like I'm just trying to one up you, because let me tell you about what makes me so important. You'll like this one.
It's the what happened to me is even worse. And the intent might be, I am the right person to talk to because I know where you've been, because I've been through so much more.
Yeah.
And then the impact is, so what I'm going through is not a big deal and you're belittling me.
Yeah.
So now thanks for making me feel shittier.
I
know where not to go next time.
Yeah, it's wielded like trying to be helpful, trying to relate, but yet the effect of it is the opposite.
Well, I think about all the people whenever I was had my first pregnancy, and they'd be like, "Oh, because they always ask about childbirth." And I'm like, "Well, I'm thinking about going natural." And the amount of people who were just like, "Ha ha, talk to me about that whenever it actually happens." Or, "Yeah, you don't get a badge for natural childbirth." I'm like, "You asked, I didn't offer this information." I don't
I
understand where this is coming from.
right? Like, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life without your opinion, and I'm
Right.
so grateful to have it.
Mhm,
Thank you for
mhm.
telling me what to do.
Yeah.
But thank you for trying to scare the shit out of me before I have my first baby too. Like, no, this is gonna be way worse than you think it is. There is
Yeah.
no way.
Oh, oh gosh, that brings back memories of that time in my life.
Mhm.
Oh,
But it also goes to the why did you ask?
Yeah.
t- yeah.
It-
Why did you ask in the first place?
And that's a wonderful segue to the next thing that was floating in my head, which is asking to speak instead of asking to understand,
Mm.
right? Like
Mhm.
listening to wait for the person to finish speaking so you can go ahead and carry on with what you wanted to say, or listening to understand.
It's like you want to come across as not you, but the person wants to come across as compassionate. So you ask a very pointed question to get the other person onto the topic of, oh yeah, so let me tell you about my experience with that now.
Yeah.
Now that I've politely allowed you to speak, we're going to get to what I really wanted, which was to talk about me and what I want.
Yeah. The way that we're talking about it right now feels like an unexpected dance move.
Which I would say
Where you're
goes
like,
into manipulation. So that's
yes.
like the bag. If we're phrasing what we're discussing in a way that would fit in the bag, I would say that's
Mhm.
manipulation.
Manipulation. So insecurity and manipulation. It's good luggage.
I feel like
Okay.
y'all are chucking stones at me here.
Like, stop describing me.
Oh, I just think about especially earlier in my life with relationships and how I had a very, very hard time relating with people because I was always trying to show them how amazing I was. Let
Right.
me show you how amazing I am. You're going to love me. And it created
Mm.
this massive distance rather than bringing them closer because, at the end of the day, people care about themselves. Um,
And yeah, I mean, file it under insecurity. You will love me, love me, right? That
Say that you love me.
need to be loved. Look how great I am.
mm,
Look all these things I can do. I can juggle. I can tap dance.
yeah. Well, that's where the whole instead of being interesting, be interested comes
Mhm.
from. I know that I'm 100% guilty of that on a regular basis. I want to prove how smart I am or how talented I am, and let me show you all these things I'm doing. I'm so excited about what I'm doing. I want to talk about what I'm doing. Let me just tell you about what I'm doing, because once you hear about what I'm doing, you'll realize how freaking amazingly smart I am, and you're going to love me because of it.
Right. Right.
And leaves
Like,
no room whatsoever for the other person.
yeah. Insecurity. So that will take a lot of yeah. You can't vacuum pack it, right? Like, if you're packing the luggage, that's going to be a hefty one. Insecurity is a hefty one.
Mm-hmm.
It's too dense to vacuum pack. Yeah. I'm thinking about sarcasm in the category of belittling, of reducing the other person to make to make to make us feel bigger and more important. humor at the other person's expense. What are you thinking, Lee?
Well, I'm actually thinking about how sometimes, if applied well, it can actually be really, really funny to use sarcastic humor.
Oh,
And if there's too high of a dose, or if we use one specific tactic too often, like for instance, I know this one guy who's absolutely hilarious, and he uses a lot of self-effacing humor. So he's always tearing himself down, tearing himself down. And finally, one day I told him, I said, dude, I really, really like you. And if you continue to make fun of you, I'm going to have to whip your ass because I like you enough that I'm going to defend you from yourself.
See, that's where
That's
my
great.
brain went, the self-deprecating,
Mm-hmm.
because I would say I'm guilty of both. I try not to use sarcasm in a mean way, but I am just very sarcastic. But what I'm worse at is the self-deprecation for sure, which kind of goes with that self-loathing
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
category.
when the dose is too high, it becomes poison.
And that's exactly when you over index on
Mhm.
any of these items that you're putting in the bag, you ruin relationships. All of them, the root of all of them can look like compassion and connection and vulnerability and honesty, right? Like, what's an earlier item that we put in a bag? We talked about one-upping.
Mhm.
Right? When we talk about one-upping, that's the over-indexing. It looks like my hip surgery, like my childbirth, like you have no idea what pain is until you've been through what I've been through. But when used in a dose that's helpful, it can look like there is a time and a place when connecting with someone for a story of what we've been through. There is a time and a place to share something terrible that we've gone through, right? Like a friend that might be sharing a story of abuse. There might be a place for that confidant to share their own experience with it. When it's done in the appropriate, helpful context, it can make the person feel safer and make them feel more likely to open up. Like, oh, this person gets me. They've been through something similar.
There's no more valuable words on the planet Earth than "me too." Like, I see you, I get you, I understand where you are. Me too.
Yeah. And it can give a person hope. Like,
Yeah.
like we've been in similar situations. Your pain is different from my pain, but here's what I've gone through and here's what helped me, right? So coming from a place of service and deep and genuine curiosity usually helps to take care of that over indexing, so you can unpack that shit and make it useful and productive.
But it's usually more like serve them an appetizer, not a meal. If somebody's sharing something painful with you, like, you know what, I've gone through something similar. If you ever want to hear my story, I'm happy to tell you, and leave it at that. Don't try and say, well, let me tell you about my hip surgery. Let me tell you all the things that went wrong for me. Just, hey, yeah, I've actually been through something that I think's relatable. If you ever want to hear about it, I'm happy to share what I went through. But I also think it's reading the room, because Lee and I went to a friend's event, maybe a month ago, and one of our mutual sets of friends, she was talking to me about some pretty bad life experiences that they're going through right now, and I shared a little bit more specifically. It related to some things that Lee and I went through, especially early on in our marriage, in a similar situation. And I tried not to overshare, but at the end of the conversation, our friend gave me a hug and was like, I really feel better knowing that somebody else has gone through this. But it's a balancing act, because you don't want it to turn into well, let me tell you how bad we had it. Because that's and I think the intent is what most people unless they're completely tone deaf. I think the intent is what most people are going to be able to pick up on. And are they sharing to one up me, or are they sharing to show that I am not alone?
I love that you bring up intent. And I think that's a wonderful point. And I think it's a bidirectional point. It's what is that person going to be understanding what you just said? Are they going, what are they going to understand about our intention and us entering the conversation with intentionality? Or what do we want the impact on that person to be? That's a really, intent is bidirectional. That's what I'm hearing.
Another huge piece too that keep hinting around at, like, a lot of people get their sense of importance from the struggles that they go through with good reason, because overcoming struggles is definitely one of the things that we thrive on as humans.
Mm-hmm.
But then to make it all about us, like, let me tell you how important I am because I am struggling. It's like, oh, that kind of drives me nuts because it can get stuck in that victimhood, and that I have a hard time being with the victims, and where their only sense of importance is being in the struggle.
So what I'm hearing is pride needs to go in the bag.
Yeah. Yes. Along with
Pride.
insecurities. I think along with insecurities, pride fits. It's like the travel companion of insecurity. I love that. Yeah. Pride.
Buy one, get one free.
BOGO.
Yeah. What do you feel like the definition of pride is?
Something around like your ego weighs too much.
Because once
My brain-
again, pride can be a very healthy thing.
Oh,
I'm very
yeah.
proud of my accomplishments.
Absolutely. Pride can look like self-respect.
So self-respect, my brain's going to self-importance, which isn't inherently a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just Googled it.
Cheater.
Oh, well, no, cheater would have been if I didn't tell you that I Googled it. A feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements. So, yeah, I agree with Lee. If you go over, it's like you're prideful in a bad way. If you go under, then you really devalue yourself and minimize yourself. You don't want, that's not helpful either.
I don't feel like pride on its own belongs in the bag. I feel like self-importance does. Because pride could be such a humongous positive motivator.
But didn't we say that about other things in the bag too? Like
Yeah.
we've agreed that other things that have gone in the bag can be positives. The point of the bag is it's just like pride is a deadly sin, right? It's one of the 7 deadly sins. That doesn't mean it's bad. Greed, same thing. Like when you think of greed, most people think of money. It's money inherently is not bad. My vote says it goes in the bag, but just with the understanding that there is a threshold. There's a point where too much pride, well, you're gonna get the red ass with it.
Too much pride, to me, over-indexing on pride is dropping into insecurity zone. If you need to hold on to it so hard, and that's what you're going to define yourself, that tells me that you might be afraid to put it down and see what else is there. Because then you might find things that you don't want to see. Like, oh shit, that is my only accomplishment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh shit, I've been through some really tough stuff in my life earlier. Oh no, I haven't done much since, huh?
Yeah.
Well, that feels bad. So I'm just gonna keep
such a
holding.
huge word, attachment. Like attachment to that pride, attachment to
Yeah.
attachment to expectations. Oh, That's a whole new bucket we can open up there.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
That's a good one that belongs in the bag.
Yeah.
expectations is such a huge one that can ruin relationships. I expect all these things of somebody, and yet all these expectations live in my head. I've never actually told these people. I just expect them to do. They're supposed to know. They should know.
Right. That's right. You should
They
know.
should
You
just
should
know
read
these
my
things,
mind.
right?
Read my mind. Yes. Yes. That's a good one. That definitely has to go in there. And
Yep.
yes, like everything else, the positive of expectations, like the bright side of expectations is when used properly, it could be a beautiful thing in aligning two people.
And we can't not have expectations of others because that's how we create boundaries.
Of course.
But we can't have unrealistic expectations and we can't expect people to read our minds.
Mhm. And we can't expect people to define terms the way that we define them.
Thinking about unhealthy boundaries right now. I know it's so fun to watch people who have discovered this idea of
Oh.
boundaries when they first start to try and exercise the principles. Like, I'm going to make this person do that. I'm going to tell this person that. And I'm going to make sure that all these people around me are following all these rules.
It's like, well, right. Now you're just stomping on them.
Yeah. Well, it's the idea of another thing that needs to go in the bag, and that's control. We
Mhm.
absolutely cannot control others.
Well, and I find a lot of people don't understand what boundaries are. Boundaries, like a lot of people who talk about setting boundaries are still talking about setting rules for other people to follow,
Mhm. Which
Right? Like
that's
that's
why
yeah.
that's why I brought up control, because anytime we're trying to control others, we are absolutely removing relationship.
Mm-hmm.
How many
Right.
times have you seen parents ruin their relationship with their kids because they want to force them into doing, like, you have to go live my life that I didn't get to live because I have all these regrets. I have all these
Mhm.
regrets, and I'm not gonna let you live my regrets.
Mm-hmm.
And then completely ruin the relationship by trying to control their every action, their every thought, their every move.
Mm-hmm. And well, we were talking about the boundaries, but
Mhm.
just spell it out. It's right. It isn't boundaries that we're setting on behalf of other people. It's what we're deciding our boundaries are, what we're willing and not willing to do,
Mhm.
and choosing to communicate those boundaries or not. Like, I am not willing to do X. I would love to help you move, but I am not willing to lug the boxes because I do have an injured back.
Yeah.
Right?
So
I
it's
am not willing.
yeah, boundaries
to-
are the conversations that you have to have before the S&M session begins.
How do you know so much about S&M sessions, Mr. Lee?
That's not what this meeting is about, Alina. That's a different meeting.
Wrong room. Whoops. I answered the wrong room.
I read a book one time. It makes me an expert.
I played one on TV. Yes. No, yeah, it's absolutely. It's now you're talking about power dynamics, which is a close cousin of control.
Mhm.
So yeah, you're talking about shifting power dynamics. What's going to help set the context is what are the rules of the road? And that's where, like, how are we defining things? What are we doing? Whether it is in S&M context, whether it is in context of a struggle, like a tug of war with a family member, or like Mr. and Mrs. Smart.
I'm curious if we can come up with like a real life example of boundaries, and like, what does this look like in real application, both unhealthy and healthy?
Well, we just started. I like it. We just started talking about some of those examples. Let me think for a moment.
So I think just one that comes to front of mind is you're not going to talk to me that way
Mhm.
versus I'm not listening to this. Because I have no control out of how anybody speaks to me. What I do have control of is whether I'm gonna fucking listen. I can hang up the phone, I can walk away, I can get in my car and drive away. But if somebody is gonna speak to me the way they're gonna speak to me, I can't control that. I can say something tough like, "You're not gonna talk to me like that,"
Mm.
but I can't set a boundary for how they are gonna behave or speak. But what I can do is get my ass away from the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it
this,
can look, oh, sorry, I was just going to add to that example that Tanya just shared. And it can look like in a friendlier setting, it can look like, listen, I want to be here for you. I want to have this conversation. I won't be spoken to this way. So I'm not available for that.
mhm.
Like, you just called me X. That's not okay. That won't happen. Like, I won't be here for that. So I'm here to listen, but I won't be insulted. So you need time? I'll give you time. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I'll be here for you.
I
And
like
that's
that you said trying to get on their side. Like, hey, we're here for the same reason. We're on the same side. I'm not against you. I'm not trying to fight against you. This doesn't need to be a fight. Like, can we find somewhere where we can meet in the middle that we agree? And once we find that place, that island of agreement, then we can start to look at what comes next.
mm-hmm. What are some other examples? That's a great one. Like how you'll be spoken to. Well, I'm thinking professional. In the professional world, in the corporate world, a classic example of an assignment that's thrown, like boss sends employee an assignment on a Friday at 5:00. It's like the age-old example. And so there's a fork in the road and a choice. As always, exercise judgment. Sometimes things really do need to be done over the weekend. A lot of the time they don't. Sometimes they do. If appropriate, asserting a boundary. And with that, suggesting a time. That's what I recommend often is, how is noon on Monday?
Yeah. Yeah, well, the first thing that I think of that's the healthy way to go about it is actually ask somebody, hey, what was your expectation of this assignment that you just sent to me? Did you want it done now? And the answer might come back, no, I just needed to send it to you before I forgot. You can take care of it on Monday. But there's so many assumptions that can come in before that conversation happens. Like, this bastard, I can't believe they sent me this on Friday, and you stupid, I can't believe how freaking dumb they are, and blah 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 blah.
Right.
Versus,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
That example is so funny because this literally happened to me on Tuesday of last week. My boss came in that she knew I was leaving early that day, and she knew but probably didn't remember I was going to be out the rest of the week. And she hands me this stack of stuff and was like, "Hey, I need you to put this in the computer for me." I was like, "I have no problem doing that. But did you remember I'm going to be out the rest of the week and I'm leaving in about 5 minutes? Are you okay with it getting done next week?" And she was like, "Oh yeah. But it's hilarious that example came up because she handed it to me. I said, "I have no problem doing this. I hope
That's
you're
right.
okay with it. It's not happening this week."
Yeah.
And
That's
and
great.
it was nothing, you know.
There's so much context there, right? So if you have previous exposure to this person, and if Tanya, in that example, if your boss was typically like, no, I need it done, right? The general expectation from prior experiences, when something is sent, there's an expectation that isn't always explicitly communicated, but according to history, like, no, you need to get it done. Like, wow, make it work. Make it work. Is it prior context? That's where the boundary, right? Then you dance with that boundary. Like, how do you want to?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes she is like that, which is why I was just like, to be clear, and for me, the boundary was, this isn't happening today, but I'll
Mhm.
help you find somebody else if this needs to be taken care of
Right.
today or this week.
Yeah. Yes.
So that was my hard boundary.
Mhm.
And actually, Lee helped me get into that mind frame whenever I went from teaching to counseling. He put up with so many late nights of studying and my own homework and grading other people's homework. He was like, okay, so when you're a counselor, this stops, right? We get our wife and mother back. That's the deal. And it was in that conversation that boundary was set for me from that point on. As soon as I became a counselor and was no longer in school, I never, unless it was 100% necessary and of my own free will, never brought work back, and rarely will check email or do anything when I am not on the clock. And that was my boundary. And I've found it just having that conversation with my husband. It's been so easy to keep that boundary in my work life.
It's beautiful.
He probably doesn't even remember the conversation, but I do very well. And I use it as an example continuously for new teachers, especially who drive themselves crazy with not adhering to those boundaries.
So that one conversation with your husband, who's here on the call, did you know?
Oh my God.
You see, you've made him speechless. Keep
Yeah, no,
talking.
I was just sitting back waiting for more. I was just soaking it in,
Yeah. So it made you speechless. So
watch the pride, sir.
I am like, it's what she said. That's all. Yeah, like that one conversation with your husband where he helped you reflect on your own boundaries. Then that trickle down effect was you had conversations with new teachers.
Dozens of conversations.
And then dozens of those people who were affected, who asserted boundaries, that trickle down effect to their families, right? Their friends, and what that impact that had on them. Just that one conversation with your husband where he helped you reflect and make a small tweak, seemingly small, not small, because that impact is tremendous. That's powerful. Lee's soaking it in. He's like, yes.
Yes. Tell me more about how amazing I am.
Well, it helps that the people I'm preaching this to, I think the educational professionals are probably the absolute worst at letting people guilt them into doing above and beyond. I think there's an expectation that
I think this is a universal thing.
I do think it's universal, but anyway, we're not going to get into that because I could go on a tangent about it. But
try and make that statement to a nurse or anybody working in the corporate environment, and
it's people. People are going to keep peopling.
Yeah,
that's my
from what I understand, that is not how things work at all in Europe.
They seem to know boundaries. We should move to Europe.
Well, I mean, the work-life boundaries for sure.
I don't think they have hurricanes in Europe. At least, I'm sure they don't. We'll go to Europe.
Yeah, Europe is like, those boundaries. Wow, it's there are all these memes out there about the difference between like a European corporate worker and an American one, and their attitudes towards time off. European version is like, I'm out for August, like figure it out. I actually spoke to someone yesterday who works with colleagues where if they're out for the month of August and they receive an email, like if I send you an email, Tanya, and you're in France and you're off on vacation, that email gets deleted, and I receive an automatically generated email that says, Alina, You tried to reach out to Tanya while she was on vacation. That email got deleted. Reach out to someone else. She can't help you. I just spoke to someone yesterday who works with colleagues where those are the messages he gets. On the other hand, the US is like, I'm so sorry. Like there's memes going around. So sorry, having heart surgery in 2 hours. Like this one last phone call. So sorry, I won't be available for the time that I'm under anesthesia. But like in the recovery room, I'll be checking it. Don't worry, you can count on me.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
How have we been brainwashed that this is okay? That's also a good way to ruin relationships. Work.
Yep.
Say more about work. How is work a great way to ruin relationships?
When the relationship with work takes precedence over the relationships with people, that is whenever it's a problem. At what point are the tasks that we are doing more important than the people around us? And
which really ties into the boundaries I was talking about. Is I didn't feel like at the time I was putting my family on the back burner, like I was, but for what I felt like was a greater purpose. And that's how that conversation came to be, which was, okay, I get why you're doing this, Tanya, but I need to know there's going to be an end point. And that's where those boundaries were put in. But I know there's so many people who don't, and their relationships with their spouses, their relationships with their children, their relationships with their friends just suffer endlessly because of it.
Yep.
and sometimes there are exactly what you just hinted at, is that we have seasons. We have seasons that we need to do the grind, or we need to have seasons, like set seasons aside that we're going to work on just the relationships. So, but now we go back to let's set those expectations and let's actually have those conversations around it. Like, hey, I need to really dive in deep to get this work done. I've got this big project. You okay with that?
Well, okay or not, sometimes that's how it is. We're accepting that person not being okay. That can
Sometimes you do have to dive in deep, and that's
Yes.
what she said.
I'm going to take a sip of my iced coffee to that.
Cheers.
Cheers. That's the kind of drinking that I do these days. Is you've got, this is the like the double fisting I do these days, in all honesty, is water
And
iced
coffee, huh?
It's my favorite.
That's it. That's what I alternate.
What, double fisting?
It's my favorite form of double fisting. I was actually about to say.
I don't understand what you're saying. These terms are unfamiliar and very scary. Yes. Where's the paddle?
Shall we tone it down?
Oh, my paddle's in the living room. I have a rowing paddle that I got.
Are you going to spank me for being too inappropriate?
Tanya, you might get spanked for being a good girl.
That might be sound as much fun.
It's a reward. Doesn't have to be punishment. Let's design this. The paddle that I really do have in my living room it's a rowing paddle, and it is a reminder to myself of navigating our lives and taking responsibility for our lives and the world and the unpredictability and taking change as it comes.
It's a metaphor.
It is such a metaphor. Oh my God, it's a metaphor. You're gonna love it.
It's coming.
Wait, hold up your coffee and say coffee talk.
Coffee talk. You remember that?
Yeah.
With Linda Richmond. It's like,
Welcome to coffee talk.
I'll give you a topic to discuss. The Civil War was neither civil nor war.
Today on Coffee Talk, it's Barbara Streisand, the queen herself.
Do you know that Mike Myers, that entire routine was Mike Myers making fun of his mother-in-law?
I believe it.
The
I
entire
believe it.
thing.
I
That's
love Mike Myers.
his mother-in-law. That was it. Okay. So you're planning to have a really bad relationship with someone, right? You're like, what can I do to really ruin this? And you're like, okay, we talked about all these attributes that you're going to want to make sure you pack in your bag. I'm like a self-check. Is there anything that's so big that it doesn't fit in the bag, but it's still coming with you?
Family on the Mike Myers mother-in-law. Like in connection with that, I feel like if you either allow your family too much into a relationship, and this would probably be more for a marriage and less for friendships, but I see it happen in friendships too. If you allow your family to dictate too much in your personal relationships, it can that can be a pretty big bridge to burn.
So going all the way back to the beginning of our relationship, one time Tanya's mom decided to ask me, what are your intentions with my daughter? And I said, that's none of your damn business. And that's whenever Tanya went, oh, he's the one.
I thought it was, do you love my daughter? I thought that was the question.
Yeah, it was something along those lines. I don't remember exactly right, but something along those lines. And
that was definitely his response, though.
Wow. You see, different context. That would have been cool with me. That is cool for none of your damn business.
Well, and I don't even remember what her reaction was, but had I had a different relationship, or if I had been too concerned with what, she thought, or anybody else for that matter, I could see how that would have been a negative turn, but no, that was a positive turn for me.
Yeah, that's
a turn on, if you will.
Yeah, it sounds like for that context, Lee's ability to delineate and assert boundaries was a turn on to you. Turn on for you.
Yeah. I mean, but in all honesty, I do think that relates quite well. But I'm thinking of the people, like I hear so often of people who maybe there's a financial dynamic, or there's some big decision that has to be made in the household, and then husband feels one way, wife feels another way, and one or the other goes to mommy or daddy or brother or sister or whomever, somebody in the family, and they have a different opinion, and then all of a sudden you come back and, well, my dad really says that we should do this, so now I think we should do that. And instead of using your own brain or coming up with a solution together as a smaller family unit, you bring in other people who are not directly affected by whatever the situation may be.
Right.
And when you allow other people to make big decisions for you, and they are not directly affected by them.
Well, not to mention, there's no way they can have all the data necessary to make the right decision. They hear like 3 sentences and automatically come up with all these stories around what these sentences mean. So that now they're making up the whole backstory, making up all the actual facts in their head that may or may not be true. And then they're trying to give you this advice that doesn't have all the real data included. It's all stories. It's all conjecture.
Yeah. And well, what you're hitting on, it's directly, illustrated by, like marriage, partnership, like personal relationships, work relationships too, anywhere. Where do you feel it's a sense of identity is what it hits on, right? It's sense of self-reliance and belief in ourselves.
Mhm.
Like, am I able to make a decision? Because there's the over under indexing thing. There is a world where you can talk to a trusted friend or a trusted family member, take that input into consideration, run it through your system, right?
Mhm.
Your brain, your life experience, your gut reaction, and come up with, you know what? Part of what they said does make me think about XYZ. I still
Mhm.
feel the same about this, but so you sort of put together different inputs, but you're the one driving the car, right? If you're the one in charge of the machine, taking input into account could be really helpful, right? Maybe someone's providing shared a perspective that you didn't think of that you're finding valuable. So bringing that in, and Tanya, to your point, like still deciding it together. So as in an example of a marriage, it's, Uncle Bob suggested this, and where I think he might have a point, and I want to talk to you about it, is X. What do you think about that? Because we're still making the decision. Uncle Bob did bring up something that might help us.
Mhm.
So why would I chuck it? Just because I didn't come up with it doesn't mean it's not valuable.
And that really,
can have,
yeah.
what's that?
And just what you're saying really brings in more light on the fact that everything we're saying that we're throwing in this bag can have positive outcomes. It can have positive attributes if we just utilize it the correct way. And we microdose. We don't down a whole bottle of it.
Yeah.
Some of
I
what
think-
you're hinting at there is the interdependence versus codependence.
Mhm.
Codependence is
that.
I don't trust myself, therefore I'm gonna let everybody else make my decisions for me, or versus I'm going to be interdependent, and because we are together, because we are talking this all out and then getting data from different sources, now we've risen to a whole new level that was not available all on our own.
And the word that comes up for me is discernment.
Mhm.
It's that self-awareness of, where are my boundaries? Is my pride stepping in? Like, is my ego here too much? Like, so that awareness and discernment of, when am I listening to input and taking it under account and I'm in control? And when am I taking my brain out of my head, putting it on a shelf and letting someone else get in and drive?
Mhm. Hey, y'all remember the movie Forrest Gump, when he drinks all those free Dr. Peppers and he meets the president?
I've got to pay.
I gotta pay.
This is a great place to end it. No?
Thank you for listening to That's a Great Point with Alina Doran, Michelle Aalbers, and Lee Smart. To find out more about how we can serve you, check out our links in the show description. Thanks for playing along.